Get a motion to adopt the agenda.
Motion to adopt the agenda.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Anyone against? All right. So the main topic of discussion tonight, and this is, kind of mostly just like a work session to go over kind of some of the preliminary findings that we pulled out from the survey. So I sent you guys all some stuff last night, obviously realizing this is, I'd like to get you this stuff a little bit sooner. It's been quite a bit of work trying to get to this point already, as Scott can attest to. Lots of numbers to get through. I spent quite a bit of time entering all of our mailed in survey responses while Scott and Sonia were kind of sifting through the online results and stuff. And so the document that I sent you guys last night is kind of a combination of Scott and Sonia's putting together their thoughts, and then I reviewed it. And the main kind of goals for this evening are, we don't need to get super bogged down in what exactly the results are and everything like that. We do still have quite a bit of work to do to get to our final survey report. So I want to make sure we stay focused on that task while, still diving into some of this stuff. And so I'm just going to kind of maybe start off with a little discussion here and kind of go over the kind of first page and a half or so and kind of our response to the survey and everything like that. And we're going to kind of largely just use the document I sent you guys last night as kind of a guide, and we'll just kind of go through it through the meeting and talk about some next steps and stuff. But before we do that, some next steps as far as what we still need to do with the survey. We're still working on pulling together the percentage breakdown charts that pull out all of our responses to the survey that were invalid. Essentially, they're duplicate IP addresses, incomplete responses, non-property owner responses to the survey, that type of thing. So we have to, the Survey Monkey has all that stuff in there, and John can't, our version of Survey Monkey, as I understand, doesn't just push, we can't just push that stuff out. So we have to kind of do that all manually via Excel and stuff. Correct me if I'm wrong, John.
Yeah, Excel is really the tool for analyzing it post survey. Survey Monkey doesn't seem to have. It's not going to have the tools that Excel has. So we kind of have to go through that manually, and that's still taking some time, and we're still working through that. But largely, the numbers that are on the document that I sent you guys largely are driven off of that data that has those responses removed. And so getting those charts to you guys is obviously, as I said in my email to you guys, a next step that we need to do for sure. That'll help you guys visualize looking at, the words on the page. And then, some other things that we need to do moving forward. We have to code all of the open-ended responses to the survey. So all of the written stuff. And we're probably going to need a few volunteers here to do that over the next week or two, maybe would be good to try to get that stuff done. I don't think it'll take too long. We have maybe 3 people or so, working on that. And so that's one step that we need to do. And then we have to, after we get that coding done and we finish getting all of our data into kind of an easily digestible visual format after we've removed the invalid responses, then we can really start to dissect a lot of the more unclear things and unclear responses in the survey that were maybe not as obvious. A lot of the stuff in the document provided is, fairly easy to spot and kind of overarching topics that, have a fairly clear result. There's a few of them that we probably need to discuss a little bit more as well. And so, yeah, I think if anyone has some time over the next week or two and they'd like to volunteer to do some coding effort, that would be super helpful.
I'll help.
Okay. All right, Kim.
I can
Brian.
help.
Yeah, I like coding as well.
All right. Well,
I can, if you guys don't need a third, then, or I can help. It's up to you guys.
okay, that sounds good. I think that'd be perfect. I'll work with getting like a package of materials together and kind of a process of how we're going to attack that as a group together. I don't think we need to waste a bunch of time in our meeting kind of hashing that out right now. We'll figure that out here offline. And so, yeah, we're working on the charts and getting kind of the backup data to go with this report. And so then at this point, I guess I'd kind of like to dive into the document and start to kind of discuss where we're at. I don't know, Scott, if you want to throw anything in before I jump into the document, or
AJ, I hadn't planned to, but now I think I better. I didn't realize Sonia wasn't going to join us tonight, and I hope she's well.
she kind of let me know last minute.
Yeah, I understood. These things happen.
She thought she was going to be able to tough it out, but
yeah. Well, let's start with first of all, can everybody hear me? Okay.
yeah.
Yes. Good. Okay.
There is some feedback coming from somewhere, though. I just wonder where that's coming from.
I'm hearing that as well, so I don't think it's me. Well, let me start.
Unmute if you're not talking.
We should all mute our mics if we're not talking. That'll help.
Good idea. Well, I want to start first of all by complimenting Kim. I love what you've done with the place. It looks spectacular. So. And I guess I want to frame all this by saying, I've been a thankful contributor to this over the last couple of weeks. Sonia really did the heavy lifting, and our chairman, as I recently discovered, has been doing a bunch of raw data entry. There's been a lot of work behind the scenes that I am not going to take credit for, and yet I think we need to start with huge kudos to the small team of us, Brian, Kim, AJ, Sonia, that created the survey instrument that turns out was really successful. So I think let's stay on the positive to begin with. The results were really respectable, meaning a third of the ownership. I speak in generality, so I'm not going to go to specific data points and what have you, but a third of ownership was motivated to respond to the survey, and that's huge. That's I think really, again, respectable by anybody's measure. So that speaks to the quality of the survey instrument. It seems, it speaks to the efforts to roll out awareness, and everything went right. So what we've got is a ton of information, and all of it good. And now our task as a committee is to figure out, how do we go forward with this? There were a few things that were, in my view, expected. First of all, the distribution of responses is pretty much the distribution of population in Sudden Valley. So, roughly, 2/3 of the respondents came from west of Watkin Boulevard, and a third came from, let's call it, gates 1 and 2. So that is pretty representative of our population and so forth. So that was a good thing. What I didn't expect personally was the volume of open-ended responses. The survey was designed that way to inspire, just kind of spontaneous feedback, or, let's call it open mic, and it was incredibly successful. I was privileged, along with Sonia, to be given I think it was let's call it was about 250-page report to start with 2 weeks ago. It was an overwhelming amount of information in terms of the raw data. But, fully 2/3 of that is the open-ended written responses. Some are very lengthy, some are very nasty, some are, but on balance, it's really productive information. And, as AJ, I think, opened with, a few minutes ago, the challenge is to get our arms around that information and figure out how to make best use of it. And so, when he's, I think, asking for the show of volunteers, it's really to begin to look at that, the things that aren't so quantifiable through Excel or whatever, but we really need to harness. So I'm going to stop there, and I think probably unless anybody differs, I think probably the best way to go forward tonight is maybe Q&A. I don't want to present to you the results that you've been equipped with, but if there's stuff that you've got questions on, I'll do my best to respond to it. In full disclosure, Sonia's can better speak to methodology of the survey or specific data points, but I think I've got a pretty good grasp on what we have to work with here, and it's a lot, people, which is a great problem to have. So it's just, how do we break this down into bite-sized pieces? I'll do my best not to bias anything here. In my judgment, there's no bombshells here. There's no, if anybody expected something really, revelations on the golf course or the dance barn or, what have you, the hot issues in our community, there's nothing here that can really be misconstrued or misunderstood, I believe. So I'll stop there. I'm sorry for the overture, but I think it's necessary for you guys to understand what I can and cannot do tonight. I'll wing it. So.
Yeah, and so just to kind of follow up with that, as we kind of work our way through this document and kind of do Q&A and discuss some of these these talking points here. Just a reminder, I said it in the email last night, like the next step, immediately next step is to put together a kind of a preliminary summary of the survey. There is a lot of data to go through to get to the final report, and that's likely a ways down the road at this point, but the community obviously is going to want to know some information here in a more short-term manner. And we do have some somewhat clear, pictures that we can paint from the survey, I think.
you know, and we're going to discuss those, and we'll, you know, once you see the charts too, so you can see the data behind this stuff, as Scott and Sonia and I have, you know, it helps wrap your head around everything a bit. Kim, you raise your hand.
Yeah, I just want to say kudos to the results on this. 32% online response rate is amazing. You can generally not expect to get more than 10% responses on most surveys. 32% is unheard of. And then also there just seems to be some very, very good trends in here that I think we should all pat ourselves on the back for putting out such a successful instrument that really got some really good data for us to work through on how we should be moving forward in our community. So I just wanted to congratulate everybody on this, because I think this is a successful, very successful response. And Brian, I know, you know, with your survey experience, 32% is not normal. It's exceptional. So yay for us.
And I would, you know, just to add on to the kudos and everything, big thanks to John with all your help with SurveyMonkey and everything like that, and Joe for allowing staff to help us with this. It's definitely greatly appreciated. You know, big kudos, yes, to everyone in the committee. I'd also like to thank all the people who stood on the side of the road and shook some signs for our committee. I do believe that has an impact in trying to get people to participate. You know, it's the last thing they see before they turn in the gate, and hopefully it's something they remember as they pull into their driveway, and then they're like, oh, okay, I'll go do that now because they asked me to. And so I'd like to thank those people who took time to do that for us. And so, yeah, let's kind of dive into this report a little bit, and, you know, thinking about as we go through this stuff, you know, we're going to be putting together this preliminary summary report, which this document I sent you is kind of the beginnings of that. We'll probably include some charts and some tables, you know, for the community. It's good to have multiple ways of learning, you know, the data visually, wording, that type of thing. Everyone's brain is wired a bit different. We didn't want to get too bogged down in charts tonight, you know, and dealing with questions over charts and things like that. So that's why we kept it mostly, you know, to our talking points for tonight. Sonia has been working on some charts, and we'll get those things to you here shortly. I still have to take a quick look at them, at all of them before we start sending them over. And then largely we'll put together this preliminary summary, and then just like we did with last year's survey, you know, we're going to have Josh Bowens and the communications committee help us put together an infographic to kind of summarize this preliminary report in kind of a one-page graphic that's easy to digest for the community members. And then there'll be the report that goes with it for those individuals who like to read long documents. And so, yeah, let's hop into it kind of with those thoughts in mind. So yeah, 32% online survey response rate. Like everyone has said, that's really good, and really happy to see that. Big kudos for the community. Thanks for showing up. We appreciate it. And please continue to keep showing up. You know, we got 1,176 responses on the online survey. Of those, there was 881 were unique surveys. You know, the 295 of them were duplicate IP addresses, where we used the first completed questionnaire in every set as the valid response. Some of those pulled out were, you know, we did have some non-residents
who came in to the survey and checked the I'm not a resident box, and that's pretty much all that happens with those people. That just basically kicks them to the end of the survey, but we had almost 50 people do that. So I don't know if a lot of people were just testing out how things worked. We had a lot of people who seemed to just kind of go through the survey to review it before they answered questions as well, and various things of that nature. So that's kind of what I was talking about earlier. We got to call out some of the data, and that's what we're working on now. So kind of the highlights of that.
If I can add to
Yeah, go ahead.
AJ's explanation there, and this is one area where candidly I wish Sonia was with us tonight to better speak to this, but let me offer a couple things. First of all, I had a neighbor that said to me, well, I have one computer and I own 2 properties and I submitted 2 surveys. So yes, there's a duplicate IP address, but seems to me both my surveys should count. And the answer is, well, they don't. So I'm not saying that's right or that's wrong, but I think, for the committee, that's important to understand is this is not voting. This was basically a poll of households. And so that's an important distinction. And it may not be the answer that's, certain people want, but factually that's correct. And that's why some of the delay in rolling out the results was a function of just sorting this out, the IP, multiple IP addresses. And I think the responsible decision was made to say, well, if you're, nobody's stuffing the ballot box, and these aren't ballots, but you know what I'm saying? Nobody's stuffing the results. But it's important to understand that distinction, because some people, believe that that's their entitlement. This is a different animal. This is a survey exercise is a little different. So, hopefully everybody can grasp that. Again, some of the rollout or the delay in the rollout, Sonia, myself, AJ been equipped with this data for a couple of weeks, and still my head's spinning. And John's done a great job of responding and rolling it up, and there's still some trickling in. So to kind of explain why the community, I think, is a little impatient right now to say there seem to be some hurry up to do this survey. And yet, where are the results? And we need to be thoughtful about how that question is answered. First of all, why it's taking as long as it has. It's going to take a little bit longer, I think, to do this responsibly. But it's all good. It's a really good project that is going really well. So I'll stop there in terms of, I think we're starting with, who responded to the survey. And we've talked about, the nature of the responses. We've talked about the gates are, pretty well represented. I'm not real comfortable talking about the written versus online response exercise, but that seemed to go fine in terms of the percentage of hard copy survey replies was much lower, but that was predicted. And the online reply rate was actually much higher than predicted. So we're all good right now in terms of the body of responses. I'll stop there.
Speaking of responses, I didn't see a differentiation in the summary of the differentiation between owners and renters. Is that information going to be available?
I'm glad you asked, because I meant to offer that. The short answer there is the number of renter responses was really, really low.
27,
and so
I think.
It didn't skew the results on any question or on balance. And I think, personally, I'm thankful for that. I thought this was going to be a bigger issue or an issue. It's not, it's a non-issue, as it turns out. It's much like the low number of non-resident responses that essentially we're tossing. which is not to say we're dismissing the renter numbers, but it was really, really low. I think one tabulation I had was something like 27.
Yeah, I think it's
Something like
about
that.
27. Some
Okay.
of the thoughts with the renters would be to pull it out, put it in its own little database, and we could have a little renter summary report as like a appendix to the final survey report, something along those lines. People can see what renters, are
Right.
feeling as participants in our community and members of our community.
Okay.
Brian?
Forgive me for, again, I wasn't prepared to do what I'm doing tonight. Before I lose a thought, something important in my judgment as to who responded to this survey, in the 3-page roll-up that you were provided last night, there's a line item on page 2 that says 33% of all respondents have been Sudden Valley residents or Sudden Valley owners for 5 to 14 years. I viewed this a different way. Of all our respondents, a third have been here for less than 5 years. And I think that's important. It reaffirms this churn, the turnover that we suspected is going on with our community. And it is going on with our community, and it's healthy. But it's important to understand that a third of the responses have been here, are relatively fresh to this community, and here's their views.
Is that
On
a
the other
different number, Scott? Because
I'm
are
sorry.
are you looking at a different number that's not on here? Because
No.
if 33% have been here from 5 to 14 years,
That's right.
how do you gather that 33%
Kim,
or less?
Good question. The raw data says a third of the community has been here for less than 5 years. A third has been here for 5 to 14 years, and a third has been here for 15 or more years. Okay, so that's another way to state the same view of the water glass, right? And it's no view is wrong, but it was what struck me that I don't think was captured in the summary you were given is exactly what I stated. I think, a third of this is fresh perspectives. These are people that homeowners that are new to this community, and this is what they've seen. This is what they've experienced. And these are very important. It's a very important subgroup. On the other hand, you've got people that have been here a long time and have experienced a lot and have observed a lot and may have a different view of everything. So I think we need to kind of start with, we've started with, we've got great numbers in terms of response rate. Now, who are these respondents? And I think it's a very healthy segment. We lack demographic data, which, not to digress, but demographic data is something that's really essential to the long range planning committee's charges. And so we're beginning to better understand the composition of our community through this survey. And again, I kind of keep circling back to saying there's a third of the people that are different than the people that have resided here for 5 or more years. And there's no bias in that. There's a hunch. Something intuitively tells me that's an important distinction. So dismiss that thought, hold that thought, take it for what it's worth, but I felt compelled to interject that.
Scott, with regard to the demographic data, will we be able to get some of that through the census?
Yeah, we'll have to definitely get some demographic data through the census. Well, I just want to say one thing before, I think everyone probably has a lot of questions. I know, Scott makes this statement and you guys don't all have the charts to see, everything. And I want to be perfectly clear here that there was no 100% consensus here on all of this stuff that we gave you between Scott, Sonia, and myself. So, we have work to do,
dissecting through this stuff. But at the same time, we don't have all the data to you guys yet. So it is somewhat hard to have some of those conversations, here. And so, I fully believe at our next meeting here, we'll be, very much more prepared to have a very in-depth discussion. We can really start to hammer in on some of the points that maybe Scott drew on and that Sonia had differing thoughts on, and kind of talk about those and bridge that and get a feedback from the whole committee on that. So I just want to be clear on that. And then just because we got 2 new people, one thing that with the responses and the online survey, we went back and forth as a committee on the setting up a user login and making them go that route to be a valid survey, or keeping it totally anonymous. And we settled for the anonymous, knowing after talking with John that we were going to have some of this legwork to sort out the data once the survey was complete. And so I just wanted to throw those 2 things in there. Brian, your hand was up, and then I think Steffi, and I'm not sure if I missed anyone else.
Yeah, I wanted to echo Kim and others and just thanking you guys for doing the hard work and all of us for putting together this survey. I think we all did a good job. I think you guys did a particularly great job putting this data together in a preliminary way. Yeah, I'm seeing, as I'm looking at the data, I'm seeing some things. I did some research about IP addresses and such, and not to rain on the parade, we've done a fabulous thing. It's a good start. And I think this surveying is going to happen long term, but I'm really going to be a big advocate, I think, of the portal next year, I think, because I think it is important to preserve that type of scene. I think if somebody really wanted to game the survey, they could have. IP addresses can be altered, changed, and any given spot can have up to 4 or 5 IP addresses. You can have a IP address for your work. You can have an IP address through your internet protection device. So I think that if anybody wanted to game the survey, they could have, in a sense. So we should look at these results. They're important results, important for the community. I think because of that, there's not going to be, like, as Scott said, any bombshells or anything like that, but it gives us a good sense for things. And we want to bring people together, and it's beautiful that 33% of the community responded to this survey. That's a fabulous thing. But I say we build upon that and we try to tighten up some things next time. And maybe all of us can look at this and identify some questions that perhaps this survey didn't quite nail or didn't quite answer, and as I was going through, and I can't think of anything specifically right at the moment, but I was thinking of, boy, I wish we had answers to this or that. And one other thing, it'll be interesting when we do, have you guys tabulated responses for the paper surveys?
Yes, I have inputted all of the paper surveys into its own Survey Monkey receptacle, basically.
Oh, cool.
And John's pulled that data out. I just finished doing that like Friday maybe, or Saturday morning. And so, yeah, so I don't even know if Sonia and Scott have had time to even look at that data yet and compare it, and start contrasting towards the online stuff. That's definitely
that'll be very interesting.
Task for the next, few weeks.
Yeah.
No, those are all every survey is important to capture, period. And that, again, that's why this has been kind of slow to close the data count. You'll notice not only in a lot of what is written in the 3-page summary you were given, but also the way I'll speak tonight is in generalities. It's nearly a third or half or more than half. It's for that reason. But I don't think, Brian, to try to answer your question, whether it's renters, whether it's hard copies, there's really nothing that's moving the needle on any particular question or issue significantly. We have to get it right. And maybe to come back to something you asked Mike earlier, something we don't want to skip over is there's going to be absolutely full disclosure of the raw data. You know, if anybody on this committee or anybody in this community cares to do their own analysis, knock yourself out. it's
That'll all be included in the final
mind-numbing
report.
amount of information. And you know, people will, everybody looks through a different lens, right? And so it's fascinating to me how some things that appear so black and white aren't, even among the 2 or 3 of us that have, you know, been into this for a couple of weeks. So I guess, you know, be forewarned, people. It seems simple on its face, but a lot of this gets kind of muddy and frankly warrants subsequent either data analyses or maybe framing questions differently for subsequent surveys. But there's a ton of useful information here. And so I don't mean to dismiss what we're working with in the least. It really, the challenge for all of us is to figure out how do we optimize it? How do we, you know, there's a bunch of stuff here. I mean, again, I'll try not to interject there's certain things that aren't of particular value to this committee that are valuable, period. But as far as, you know, the indicators that will help us go forward with policy recommendations or, you know, formulating 3, 5, 10-year plans for this, that, or the other, there's a lot of good stuff to build on here. So it's basically how do we distill it down to something usable that we agree on what really isn't conclusive and push that aside. And that's a follow-up, you know, for a next survey or a next step in this process. And I guess that should be emphasized also, not only to ourselves, but to the public, is that this is a process. This is our first shot. I think, you know, again, we're patting each other on the backs, but we did a great job and we can only get better.
A lot of work still to do though.
Yeah. Yes, there is.
But, and then another thing, I still have about a dozen-ish, 10 or 12, I think, surveys, paper surveys that were for the people who did not have computer readily available. We had basically the mailed surveys that we sent out were color copies. And then we have black and white copies at admin for people to pick up, to be able to fill out. I do still have, John's got another receptacle Survey Monkey for me to enter those in, and I'm gonna work on that. I had to take a quick break from that. My brain was swimming from entering, mostly from reading cursive handwriting, to be perfectly honest. Oh my God. When you don't even hardly know how to write in cursive, it's not super easy to read it.
That's a generation gap thing.
Yeah, exactly. I don't do that. So, Steffi, you had your hand up. I don't know if you're still.
I'm here. That's okay. My question got answered.
Okay. And so, you know, I think we maybe just kind of keep going through some of this. You know, we've gone through basically the response rate. You know, I think we got 200, and the last thing is we got 206 of our 1,000 random sampling responses, you know, which is a pretty good return rate as well for that. And it was also fairly well spread across all the gates. Gate 28 was the only gate that was not very well represented. It's very small amount of properties and most of them are not developed, I believe. And so that could factor into some of that. You know, I'm not 100% sure. I think there's really only 6 or 7 homes in that actual gate. And then there's like 30 some properties, you know, and one thing that Scott said earlier, we did this survey as like a per household basis. It was not, this isn't a ballot. You don't get, you know, an additional say on the survey because you have a second lot. That was kind of the stance that we took.
You know, and that, you know, and like Scott said, that may not be what everyone agrees with, but those are the facts of how this survey is being looked at. And, you know, and if that needs to be discussed further for future surveys, then we'll have that discussion later.
Just a question, did people feel like they would have a different perspective based on the second lot that they had? Was that, I mean, I don't understand how you could have two lots and vote twice and want to say anything differently the second time.
Yeah, that's more or less kind of my thought process as well, Kim. That, I mean, I guess if you had a vacant lot, you could say you know, and then you live next door, you could say you loved everything in one because it's your house, and then your vacant lot you don't want to pay the dues on or something. I don't know. And so you say you hate, but that doesn't really make sense. Like at the end of the day, like they're both your properties and you're utilizing them in the community the same, you know, and so that's more or less, I think, what was, you know, the thought process that we went with.
They may have looked at it as an opportunity for a husband and wife to both be able to participate if they have two properties.
Yeah, I mean,
That's
that's
right.
true.
I think in retrospect, we should have been clearer on the rules of engagement, that there's only one response per household. That should have been emphasized. I think I know there was confusion in my own household about that.
Yeah, because my husband and I sat down and filled it out together, and we had to agree on what we were going to say, and that's just what we did. It's like, okay. And
Yeah, that's what we did basically as well. You know, and then, you know, the people who did get a random sampling were able to do that. You do the random sampling. You could have done the online survey as well. Those will be tallied separately. They're not put into one large pool and calculated together. They're used separately. The random sampling is used to basically ensure that we are hopefully getting a varied response from our whole community. The online survey, we could very likely only get those people who are paying attention online, and that, you know, we have a lot of retired people here who may not be super active in those platforms and stuff, or may not even care about Sudden Valley's homepage or any of that stuff. And so, you know, I think that's more or less the main focus of the random sampling.
If I can, I think for purposes of tonight, I think we did unwittingly a great job on the survey. I don't, you know, it's sanitized. It's what it is. You know, the numbers can be debated, but I can tell you with confidence, after digging through this for a couple of weeks, there's really nothing here that can be viewed a different way. The results are what they are, and they're pretty compelling in some cases. So I think rather than spend our valuable time tonight, you know, figuring out the imperfections of the survey, you know, I'll ask you to take my word, Sonia's word for it. Everything is defensible. It was good. It's a very good effort. So I think we, you know, with the time we have left tonight, let's get into the guts of this. And if somebody's got questions about some of the things that were represented in this memo, we probably need to flush that out pretty quickly, but get to the next steps that, you know, AJ alluded to at the outset.
Yeah, I think I'll kind of continue on here. You know, 95% of the respondents were Sudden Valley residents. You know, we talked a little bit about that breakdown of how long people have lived here or whatever. And, you know, Scott, you know, mentioned that it is, you know, we do seem, based on the survey results, seem to have a fairly diverse split of, you know, timeframes of living here. You know, what Scott said about the turnover and stuff is, you know, a very relevant topic and question. I've thought about that many times. I think one of the hugest takeaways generally from this survey is 80% of respondents rated Sudden Valley as above average or better as a place to live, and 60% stating they would recommend Sudden Valley to a friend. You know, there is a lot of dialogue around our community, and it's not always positive, but I think the survey generally shows that people like living here quite a bit. They generally like all of the amenities, and they're generally very satisfied with our delivery on those things. And, you know, I think that in and of itself is a big takeaway from the survey. You know, the fact that 80% are rating it above average or better is really great. You know, and that's, as Scott alluded to, that spread of people living here, like that's, I mean, 80%, you're hitting all of those people who have lived here for various amounts of time, you know, by having such a large number make that position. You know, and kind of keep going through some of this stuff. You know, generally speaking, the Sudden Valley residents, you know, overall were satisfied with the roads. There was kind of the two biggest issues people seem to have with the roads, which I do not believe is on this statement, is plowing and roadside maintenance. And I think we all know that those are big topic issues in Sudden Valley that we're always talking about repeatedly, you know, particularly plowing. We did see a lot of open-ended, you know, myself being someone who typed in a lot of open-ended responses from the mailed surveys. You know, I saw a lot of people who, you know, maybe they weren't totally satisfied with the plowing, but they were recognizing it was getting better and things like that. And so, you know, those are all, you know, important things to recognize. You know, the majority of respondents feel the current Sudden Valley amenities and facilities are important to the quality of life, you know, and some of that, you know, the way we phrased that question, which there was some confusion around that a little bit with the community. Some people felt like they had to answer for the community. You know, we did write that question to be a little bit more open-ended so that it wasn't just like your opinion in case you didn't use any of them, but you still had an opinion that those were relevant to the community, you know? And so some people took that as we were just asking, you know, for your, you know, opinion on what the community thought and not your own actual opinion. And we did get some written feedback about that as well. You know, I think, but to some extent, you know, the goal was to try to get as many people to say that or to answer those questions, you know, and some people just don't use any of the stuff. They fully admit that, but they still think, you know, they want it, you know, they want the parks for the family, or they want, you know, the pools for these people and all that stuff. So I think that was a big takeaway, you know, and it was kind of is maybe one of those portions of those questions we need to discuss, you know, in the future for next year, as if we want to continue to word it that same way. You know, other big takeaways, you know, 65% of the survey respondents wanted to preserve and maintain the dance barn. You know, that question had multiple answers, right? There's about four answers there. Two of them dealt with demolishing and replacing. Two of them dealt with renovating and preserving. You know, overwhelmingly, it seemed like the community was in favor of preserving the dance barn. You know, and then after that, you know, there was still a lot of data that we were asking in that question on top of that general question. And so there's a lot more to dissect out of that question that once you guys get to see the charts and the numbers, you know, I think we can dive more into those things. This was one that Scott and Sonia's notes, you know, were a little bit differing on. I'll be honest, I read through all the notes and stuff. I did side more with kind of what Sonia's thoughts were on it. But I think I don't think we want to get into it here at this meeting, Scott, but I think we should have that discussion on our thoughts on this one in particular, because I think this is a big one. But without the rest of the committee seeing the charts, it's going to be hard for them to really follow. Sorry, I'm bouncing back and forth from the document, so I'm not going to see people raising your hand. So please, if you have any questions, just yell at me.
Oh.
Scott.
I was doing my best not to talk, but let me double back on a couple things that you mentioned, AJ, and I don't differ with anything you said. Oddly enough, the issue of the roads and road maintenance got left off of this. And so that, if you would make a note to self, however
I asked
this.
Sonia to put it back on, and for some reason she only put the one statement. I don't know what happened. So,
Okay.
but there was a
That's
second
okay.
statement that discussed the mowing and plowing stuff.
Right. This is a draft of a draft, right? So we can perfect this before it goes to the public. But the important generalities there are about less than 20% of the respondents are dissatisfied with the physical quality of their roads. But 40% of the respondents are dissatisfied with the maintenance of the roads, whether that's, potholes or de-icing or plowing, what have you. And then further, kind of the same number, 40% are really displeased with the maintenance of the roadways, which is to say that, the shoulders, the landscaping, the hazard trees, things of that nature. So, that's the general takeaway there that we will capture in the, next edition of this summary. So, I don't want to get that lost. The other thing that I meant to lead with tonight and did not is, if nothing else hit home with me, is that this survey confirmed that we as a community agree on so much more than we disagree. And I think however these results are presented going forward, that's the starting place. Is, people, here are the numbers, reach the conclusions for yourself, but this is all good news. We're so much closer to agreement and unity than you could believe. Stay with the process.
I agree with Scott. Honestly, probably the biggest takeaway from the survey was the dissatisfaction in the board.
Mhm.
Across the spectrum, there was, as someone who typed in a lot of open-ended questions, people across the spectrum, we all know there's divisive stuff here and there's some sides and whatnot. And, we do need to bring the community together and form, a better unity. And I agree with Scott. We can start to mend that with good survey data, and really just, continuing to get the community to be involved in, future efforts and stuff to engage people. We'll talk about it later, but how we present the final survey report and stuff like that, I alluded to in my email to you guys last night and stuff like that. So.
Can I pose a question? I don't know if we have time, but I would like, if we have time, I would just like to know what everyone's biggest takeaway was from looking at the synopsis here. I would just be curious to hear from everyone on the committee what jumped out to them. And for example, for me, what stood out were the things that were over 50%. And like you said, AJ, the disappointment with the board's lack of transparency, their perception of the board's lack of transparency, and that the board does not act in their best interest, for one. And the other one is that the respondents believe that the dues are not in line with the value of the services received. Those were the things that really jumped out to me. on this survey. And the third one was that someone believes that the COVID-related financial hardship will be present in their household. Those to me seem like huge screaming priorities of the community.
Yeah, for me, the big, I'm on the board, so the board, one was a big thing. I don't know, does anyone else want to chime in? People may still be reviewing the document and stuff, as I'm aware.
I know that one point of contention is the dance barn, and I thought the dance barn result was pretty interesting, the 65%. Yeah.
Me, that was the most interesting one. A lot of it was even the 50% dissatisfaction with.
Adam, you're really quiet.
Oh no, I'm still a little closer. Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay. For me, excuse me. Yeah, the dance barn one was somewhat a surprise, just because I thought that there was. I guess I didn't really know where the community sat on that, but I wasn't really surprised by the 50%. Of dissatisfaction with the board or the dues usage, just by what I've seen here in my past 4 years living here. And the last election and budget election that nearly turned it down is indeed an indication. People aren't happy with the way that part's being managed.
Yeah, that's true. I wasn't surprised by the board results, but being on the board, it did hit home a bit.
But you're competing with people that have been looking at the board for 15 plus years. 2/3 of the community of longer than 5 years have been looking at the board. So there's some.
Yeah, and it's going to be hard for people to give a 1-year snapshot perception on that if they've been here a while and been involved and stuff, and so.
Yeah, I did talk to a couple people I talked to. It was after the fact. I caught up with them. They said they didn't do it because they'd only lived here for like a few months or something. They didn't feel right. I'm like, oh, but everyone counts. It's your voice, your community.
Richard?
Thanks, Adrian. Good question, Kim. Yeah, for me, I like to swing the clubs every now and again. So the 15% people who want to completely close the golf I think that was fair. Like, because I hear all the time that everybody's anti-golf, and it's not what it is. Just want to break even or hopefully make $1. So I think that was clear. But it was hard. It said, I think this is the one that Scott alluded to, like it was most don't agree with increasing the dues. So I assume that most is a larger number. So I think that was, for me, that was big, but without knowing the exact number, I can't say, if it was 51 or 91. So I think that's big of what we're talking about. And then there is a typo on there. Just I thought it was interesting. It was like X amount of people patronize El Agave. I think you mean patron El Agave. Hopefully they're not patronizing El Agave in the survey. So that was.
I think it could be used. It has two different definitions.
Really?
Yeah, it has two different, right, Brian? English professor. There's two different definitions for patronize. It is the condescending one, and then there's the support one, which is odd for one word to have two meanings that mean the opposite thing.
I believe
Is that word an oxymoron in itself then?
Well, I need to look for more of a strength-based mindset, I guess. I went to, we're asking everybody to patronize El Agave. So, those are big things for me.
All right, well, we can kind of continue on through some of these. We've already been hitting on some of them. But yeah, less than 15% of respondents want to see the golf course closed down. That, you're right, Richard. That's always a narrative. To be perfectly honest, that narrative was assigned to me by people in the community with no input from myself, along with closing down other amenities as well, and it's just, it's not the truth. So, you know, but here we are. But 60% of the respondents do want to see, or the relationship between golf and the community be more productive.
Yeah,
You know, I think
also-
people, it's largely what we see a majority of the people actually saying most of the time. It's just, it seems like the people who are on, you know, the way far ends of both things, as far as like, you know, are just screaming the loudest. You know, it's kind of that classic American politics where the people at the opposite ends are the loudest people in the room, and the middle people are just, you know, along for the ride. So yeah, that's a big one. You know, the most respondents one for funding the rec program, you know, Scott had wanted to put everything in kind of generalities. You know, this is something I kind of disagreed with. I think Sonia had everything kind of in generalities too. I'm an engineer. My brain works in like more numbers than words. So I kind of directed the percentages. We're still working on, you know, putting some of those official percentages together and stuff like that. You know, and so we will get that information here as we work through this. The maintenance building was a really interesting one. A lot of don't know. A lot of people just not sure. A lot of people want, you know, to, you know, be provided some options and have us re-examine, you know, what that facility is and what they're utilizing it for. And you know, it was a pretty wide spread of everything, you know, basically. But there was a large percentage of people who selected the don't know response, just outright didn't provide any answer. You know, 36% support re-examining how maintenance building is utilized, you know, and replacing with the most cost-effective facility. You know, so the community is not opposed to, you know, helping the maintenance crew, you know, do the job that they need to do. I would say, you know, one argument you could make based on the responses that we heard just discussed about the roads and maybe the lack of support on the maintenance and plowing, maybe people want to see all of that be more productive and give them, you know, what they need to do their job all at the same time, you know, or see some of that production now increase those results, and people would be, you know, probably very favorable to, you know, making sure that we have a good facility for that. I think there's a lot more diving into that topic that we're going to have to do on that one, you know, at this point. Let's see. Oh, you know, one big one, this was kind of surprising because it doesn't necessarily fit with the, you know, narrative that we hear a lot of the times, but emergency preparedness was not the most like pressing concern for a lot of people. Less than 20% of respondents view the community's readiness as below average. You know, and then the second statement is kind of, it probably should be its own statement, since it's kind of, that's traffic safety versus emergency preparedness. But, you know, it does seem like a lot of the safety that people are largely concerned with is the roads and walking, and, you know, the lack of sidewalks and things like that, and how we, you know, how could we deal with that? How could we, you know, help with that? Adam?
Actually, something that's quite of interest to me too, because that's something we recently been talking about on the Trails Subcommittee of the Parks, Trails, and Recreation Committee. That we have all these great trails, but to create loops and to connect them together to make it, you know, experience where you're either getting more than, you know, getting that 20-30 minute walk or a nice loop or whatever. You have to go on roads sometimes, and you know, you go on like, you know, just pick a road, Little Strawberry, something. It's an easy, safe road to walk on, but you walk down Sudden Valley Drive or Harbor View, there can be some sketchy sections, and from what I understand, there was actually a gentleman hit while walking his dog in the recent month. I don't know if they ever tracked down who hit him or what that was all about, but that's something that, definitely is of useful information.
I would listen. I haven't spoken in 20 minutes. It's killing me. So
You had to catch your breath.
I know. I
You have a
would
timer going,
agree.
Scott?
What's that?
You have a timer going or what?
No. Just a joke, Kim. Try not to take the oxygen out of the room here. I would agree with you both. There's a couple things that bubbled up loud and clear to me, which is the community's want for much improved cycling and pedestrian trails, and not necessarily conventional sidewalks or whatever. It's completing trail systems, it's whatever. But there was, to me, a real willingness to spend money in certain places that were not. And this would be one that just pops out. There was another, I mean, this is completely random, but this just shocked me, which is the interest and support for court sports, whether that's tennis, basketball, pickleball, whatever. There's a lot of people that want to see that improved that don't even use it. They just want to see it improved. So it's nuggets like that are in here that we need to figure out, what do we do with these responsibly. And I'm really bringing that up for, back to Adam's comment, there's, and whether it's parks, trails, recreation, there's half of this community uses the beaches regularly. Half of this community uses trails regularly. Half of this community uses parks regularly. And by that, what I mean is like every week. So, that has to tell us something as a whole.
I think it definitely does, Scott. I will say I've, in putting together this survey and putting together this committee and compiling, a bunch of documents and looking through the old surveys that the community's done, I am not surprised one bit that trails rated the way it did. It always has been the most important thing to people, above roads even, almost.
Mm-hmm.
I've been saying it, for a while now, that I would love to see, a coordinated network of trails to get our community, from gate to gate without, having to be on the roads and stuff like that. We got lots of green space lots of, that type of thing. It'll take some legwork. I think we can partner with some people in the local community. Walk a Mountain Bike Coalition are huge trail builders. They know how to organize people to build trails too. I think they could be a good advocate for us on maybe helping us design a trail network and things like that, and making sure we're putting them in like the best, most sustainable locations and things like that. I don't think they're going to come in and build the network for us. That'll be our responsibility as a community, I think, to do that. But I think we can try to utilize some of we have a ton of advocacy in our greater Bellingham community for trails and outdoor recreation, that we can lean on some of the expertise that we have in our greater community as well. Very, very similar to how Adam and the Wacom Disc Golf Club is kind of championed the disc golf course out here for us, for basically minimal effort on Sudden Valley's part, and we can partner with kind of local organizations and clubs to kind of deal with some of that stuff. And one thing, Scott mentioned the tennis courts. Sonia put together, and I just saw Richard's thing come through as well. Sonia put together this cool graph that, we'll get that stuff to you here this week,
that I did see today. And it shows basically that need, those how important versus how satisfied, and it's got it, and it shows like the kind of gap in that stuff. And it's a really handy graph for visualizing like that huge table that people, you know, entered all those data points on. And so, yeah, that's, we'll start to sift through those charts here this week and start getting them your way, so you can start seeing the physical numbers behind this, and then you guys can start, you know, diving in and analyzing, and then providing feedback on these statements. You know, we can formalize this document here.
I would
And
add
then-
in, if I could tag on to what Scott said about being surprised about the pedestrians, because that is another, what jumped out to me are the stats over 50%. And I have heard from time to time, being on moms groups on Facebook in Sutton Valley, every couple of years, some new person moves out here and goes, let's get sidewalks in Sutton Valley. And then it gets shut down like nobody's business. But to see that there's greater than 50% of the respondents want pedestrian and cycling safety, just goes to speak how we're basically suppressing what people want here by telling people things won't work. But there is that great desire. You have a point, AJ.
I'm just gonna say, as a civil engineer who does do and design those types of facilities, traditional sidewalks in that sense in Sudden Valley are likely not a reality. You could maybe do something on some roads, but you're talking potential property acquisition from property owners. You're talking huge stormwater treatment, and you're getting into a really like huge project. You know, I want to be careful that we don't like we're not promising sidewalks here. You know, it will obviously be something that will be a part of any report that we put together when we look into like options like that. But like, just the reality of that, I'm going to say is slim. Mike?
Thank you. I will say a couple of things. First, I have heard from a lot of people who have said the same thing, that we need to have more sidewalks here. And I'm inclined to agree with them. And with regard to your comment about the tennis courts earlier, tennis courts are worthless if they're not maintained. And there's tennis courts at the marina that have not been maintained for years. And so they have no value. But AJ, let me ask you a question as a civil engineer. Would you have designed the roads the way they are here in Sudden Valley?
I mean, the civil engineer who designed the roads was paid to design the roads the way he was paid to design the roads.
Well, let me say this as a plan.
I'll start it by caveating by saying that. Would I personally? No. I think basically what happened was the developer wanted to not do everything the way the county wanted him to. And the county, instead of putting their foot down and saying, no, you need to, they're like, whatever, it's the 60s. Free love, right? You know, have at it. And that's basically, I think, you know, in a sense, what happened. Like, I do not believe in today's day and age, if you were to, the county still approves subdivisions like this, or other counties do, plenty of people do, but they would not allow the roads to be the way they are. They would be required to be better. I mean, I have done a fair amount of driving through the various gates, and like, you know, I'm a little bit blessed. I just barely have to climb any hills to get to my house and stuff like that. But I have driven the Gate 3 roads, and good Lord, the roads coming off Sudden Valley Drive and Harbor View and stuff going up the hill are absolutely insane, you know. And so
I jog those roads like 3 times a week.
Yeah. I probably
Great
have trouble
exercise, isn't
walking,
it?
let alone
Oh
jogging.
yeah, I burned some calories on those hills. We should offer it to make money and investment to let people training for marathons come run our hills and charge them.
I can attest to that. I saw you running or walking, or sprinting the other day, Kim, because we're quite close. I don't want to get lost in the weeds of this, I know, but in terms of the sidewalk stuff, because I imagine the board's going to use this and propel their next initiatives. And like, if we can't do sidewalks, which I get, I mean, but what's the
Not
alternative?
say you can't. Let's not say we
Okay,
can't.
well, very difficult. But there's the golf course, right? Which is fair enough, but it's after certain times. But then you've also got to get to there, and like, I mean, you can't even walk against traffic, which is the best practice around that bend from Topper where you live, Kim, because you're just going to get nailed from the car coming around the corner. And when I only walk with a stroller now, like I got run off the road down Harborview and was in somebody's garden like 2 days ago, and like it's just. It's impossible to walk unless you just. It's better. It's actually safer to walk in the middle of the road, so they definitely see you. All that to say, like, what's the alternatives for routes, maybe to the trails to connect them, or I don't know, more walking times or something. But I know it'd be difficult, but it's definitely. I mean, I've met the most amount of people I've met is by walking in the stroller, by seeing other people in strollers, and we just bypass each other. So.
Adam?
One thing I noticed in walking around is like we have a need for just areas, identifying the hazard issues. Like what you were saying, Richard, there's just areas that are blind corners where you don't want to do the logical thing of walking against traffic. I mean, my wife and I have, a walk, we do the mailboxes and a couple other, and it's like, oh, we're on this part, we're going to walk on the right side of the road now because I want to be able to get out of the way of cars, be able to see an oncoming car as opposed to them not see me. And so I think a lot of it may just be identifying, especially the hazard areas and what can be done with them. Is it just having some sort of pedestrian refuge? Is it just expanding the gravel shoulder? Because I can see the difficulty. I've been in engineering long enough too that I can in this area that the difficulty of adding more paved surface to our watershed becomes gets expensive really quick. And I'm not just talking about materials to build it; it's all the mitigation and everything and the space. But I think that some potentially it's more signage, or and I don't know if signs actually even work, but something, some sort of wayfinding way that lets people know that like this is the safe place to walk, this is not, or alerting, causing traffic to slow down, which is also, one of those issues that you see flying around all the time.
Yeah.
We've seen it flying by. See it more than now that I'm working from home. There's some people that just race down Sudden Valley Drive. Like, what are you doing? You're racing from speed bump to speed bump.
Yeah. Yeah, there's really a lot to dissect with the sidewalk and the trail stuff. We're gonna need staff. Parks and Recs and Trails Committee are gonna get involved. For all intents and purposes as well. Some of these things could be important for emergency preparedness in some ways. Not everyone has vehicles necessarily. Some people may need to get out of the community via an alternative method. So there's that to factor in. Lots of things to consider in that regard. I don't want to get too bogged down on that specific topic, and I definitely know that we're likely going to need to have focus group or town hall type things to discuss some of that stuff and present some options to the community and things like that and get some feedback. Just to kind of go through, we have touched on a lot of these, but I do kind of, I think to some extent the community is watching a little bit tonight, and so we can discuss or keep going through some of these things. We discussed 50% of Sun Valley residents predict some near-term COVID-related financial hardship. I think Kim said it. I think I agree 100%. I've been touting this on the board as well for months and months. That and this is just near term. This doesn't ask people anything about what they know long term, and nobody even knows long term. Like this stuff, we keep thinking it's going to go away, then it's getting worse. No one knows, but we do know now that people are somewhat negatively impacted. Largely, there's very few people who are saying they're positively gaining in this economy and in this pandemic at this point. 50% of the respondents believe the board's lack of transparency and does not act in their best interest. That is hugely alarming. And the board most definitely needs to work to remedy that perception. Almost 50% of survey respondents believe their dues are not in line with the value of services they received. And are critical of SPCA's management of the assets and funds. I think large extent that mirrors up with the road stuff. People are not fully satisfied with the maintenance and this and that. And so, that could be a large driver in that. There's probably many other things that factor into that as well. Just kind of keep going here because there's only a couple more. This one really was surprising to me because it's definitely not the narrative you hear at all. 80% of respondents' satisfaction is very favorable to the Sun Valley views, and they actually read it on a monthly basis. You hear what? Fire starter goes in the garbage, blah, 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 but
Greg.
people may be critical of it, but they do appear to be reading it still, and so that was a surprising thing to me because it's not really what you hear coming out of the community and stuff.
Well,
people are not
AJ,
happy with the gate posters and other methods of notification and stuff like that. I think we already all know that those things are impossible to read. Staff is exploring other options in that regard. Currently, they've had some test things they've been working on. And so hopefully we can try to, come up with an easy solution to stuff like that. 32% of the membership was motivated to participate in the survey, yet 2/3 of those people did not view their involvement as having really any impact in the community. That's something that this survey and all of our subsequent actions on this committee, I hope, will start to remedy some of that perception in that regard. 35% of the residents are regularly using the library, El Agave, about 50% at least once a month. Very few people were going to Ken's Cozy Kitchen. 30% of the community are using the dog parks on a regular basis. The disc golf course is not getting a lot of utilization from the respondents. It is fairly new amenity. A lot of people, I couldn't tell you how many people were like, you can walk the golf course trails. And that has been, going on almost as long as, kind of the disc golf course has as well. So some of these newer features, we need to maybe figure out a better way to get out and,
I'd like to add to that too. The disc golf course really hasn't been promoted at all within Sun Valley. And that's probably all a bit on me as the, I guess, liaison from the club. But it's also been kind of, we want to get it. We've been working really hard to get it to a point where it's worthy of really touting. But if you, and I think AJ has provided the link before, but it's actually rated at a 4.4 on the UDisc app out of 5, which puts it at one of the highest rated disc golf courses in the state.
I will say, as a disc golfer, it is not the easiest beginner course.
Yeah, it is not a beginner course.
Expect a good hike out of the day for sure. But it is a highly rated course. It's a fun course to play.
Given the data on the views, Adam, you could write a little article for the views next month.
Yeah, I've been sitting on one, and the COVID situation this year really messed up a lot of the stuff we were going to do. We were starting off the season with what they call an Ice Bowl, which is a big, huge fundraising event. The event never happened. The fundraising did. We actually still donated like $800, $900 to the food bank right when the beginning of COVID. So we felt pretty good about that. We were, basically I had an article planned to just basically invite everybody out to start playing it and stuff. And of course, then we had to pull the baskets and shut it down. So we're reeling around for this next year to try to really up the programs, and we've got some cool things planned. We just put in some brand new T signs that really help people get around it. We spent over
If I
$500
can,
making some
there were,
improvements. So we're hoping to promote it and get that interest up there, because I think that once people get out there and they see it, they really realize what a treasure it is.
It's a great sport. I've only done it twice and I'm horrible, but I'd love to go out and try it for sure.
You have to
there were,
get AJ to get back out there with me.
Yeah,
Let's go with it.
if I may, there were a couple of really important comments AJ made a couple moments ago. First of all, a third of the property owners were motivated to not only respond to this survey, but do it at great length. There was a lot of impassioned narrative, open-ended replies. So that tells us something. Of those property owners, 2/3 of them that were motivated to do to respond to the survey feel like this is futility. I mean, I'm paraphrasing, but they feel like they're disenfranchised. They feel like, they really don't, this isn't really going to matter, but here it is. Now, couple that with the fact that 80% of there's an 80% confidence level in the Sudden Valley views, which I found astounding, and I'm pleased to hear it. But here's an opportunity to re-engage these people that feel disengaged. You know what I'm saying? I think it's essential that now that we understand that so much of the community relies upon the Sudden Valley views, something needs to be published here, before deadline in the next couple of weeks about our progress. And I don't know what that is. That's for the group to decide. But I think that's really an important opportunity here to keep people hooked, right? Again, a third of membership took the time and effort to advance their point of view, and they can't feel, neglected. So between the views, between other strategies, we have to respond. Yes.
Sorry, your mic went all crazy for just like a split second.
You know what? Something went wonky when I went to the bathroom, so I'm sorry.
You're good now. It was just like a second.
All right. Well, good. All right.
Scott,
Hopefully you got some of that.
Can I suggest, if everyone agrees to this, if we're going to want to put something in the views to show progress? Because I think you're right, Scott. We should be promoting the success of the survey. Would a snapshot of some of these items we have in tonight's summary be, or just a few of them, maybe not everything, but just, to get folks' attention and let them know that we're working on the final report. Here's a snippet of some of the responses we got to keep people interested and let them know, particularly the, the survey response rate. That really should be promoted to let people know. I mean, just a thought to toss that out there.
Yeah, just to elaborate on that, Kim, I think what would be great to put in the views would be Josh's, infographic. Hopefully Brent could reserve us maybe some front page color space to be able to put, and that was kind of the discussion here is, we need to figure this stuff out as a committee. I do not expect us that we're gonna have it figured out tonight. I do believe we are probably not hitting a deadline to get something in the November views. We may have already missed that deadline. I would have to double check on that, but it is.
I seem to remember it falls on the 21st or something.
Yeah, I think the goal at this point would be to shoot for the December views with something in that regard.
You know, we can definitely still get something out to the community before that via social media, e-blast, you know, Sun Valley website, all that stuff, you know, and then have that queued up to also include in the views as well. I think that's a good, in light of the survey results, for sure, we should be utilizing the views to engage, you know, and we can discuss maybe the committee having maybe a standing article in the views talking about progress. You know, maybe it's every other month or something like that. Not every month. We'll, you know, we'll see. But as we get more enveloped into this planning process, it'll be, you know, there'll be more stuff to kind of report on here. Let's see. I don't know, the last kind of couple things we were going through, over 50% of Sun Valley walk the trails at least monthly, you know, with 30% of those walking the trails weekly. You know, the last point, you know, which is a little alarming and is something, you know, I'm not totally surprised on after the last few elections, but 30% of respondents not totally satisfied with the integrity and security of our elections. You know, and that's definitely something we need to be striving and working towards for sure.
AJ, that's really irrelevant this round because we are doing our election with a private company, right?
I don't know. I mean, I guess that is for
I mean,
that's
we
everyone's
mailed our ballot somewhere, and it wasn't to the Sudden Valley Clubhouse. So I mean,
I
would
don't
be
want to
curious how that
speak
changes
for
the
other
perspective.
people, but it seems like that's a, you know, a perception thing. I guess everyone's probably going to have a different perception on that.
mm-hmm.
Sorry,
And
Adam.
I would wonder too, you know, it's, I wonder how that's going to change, you know, switching to a company doing it versus the way it had been done in the past. And, you know, and I also, you know, maybe, you know, some of the error of the sign, you know, I like to call it sign gate in my head, but you know, that sort of thing, you know, where does that fall in people's opinion of the mistrust of the election? Is that part of that, or is that a separate issue?
I think you're probably right. It's probably factored into that, the stealing of signs and stuff like that.
During the recall election, there were over 70 ballots that just kind of showed up and they'd already been opened and people would have actually had to see them. And it was very hard to imagine that actually happened. So that was odd. And I think that eroded some trust maybe too.
But largely this is, you know, that's pretty much the main overarching topics that, you know, we pulled out of this at this point in the game. And so kind of just to touch on some next steps forward here before we probably call it a night. Basically, I'm going to work on getting you guys some charts here over the next couple days, and so you guys can actually see the numbers behind all this stuff and start to digest and dissect it yourself. I'll work with Kim, Brian, and Steffi on getting the open-ended questions coded for that stuff. And then, you know, I think the big thing is deciding to some extent, you know, I talked to Josh a little bit about the infographic and how much we can kind of handle on it. And he said, you know, you can kind of get as big as you want, but, you know, we probably don't want like some, you know, he said you can make an infographic as tall as you want, but we probably want to try to limit this initial preliminary survey results infographic to maybe a dozen or so points. We fit 9 very easily last year on an infographic, and it felt like there was plenty of space that Josh could have worked with to squeeze in a few more and stuff like that. And, you know, I'll trust Josh. Josh is great at working those things and putting those things together, you know, real quickly and stuff like that. And so, you know, and he's good at making everything kind of look, you know, very synergistic and Sudden Valley, you know, relevant and everything like that. And so, you know, to some extent, I don't know if it's easiest to go through here verbally and everyone kind of say what they think is most important. Part of me kind of thinks maybe I would prefer you guys to take the time to look through this and maybe write an email on, you know, which ones you think are, we definitely should be including, and we can kind of, you know, please CC everybody, you know, so we can all see this. And we can kind of through email tabulate which of these things we want to start to put into the infographic, you know, and then all of this stuff we can keep in this preliminary survey report, you know, but the infographic is going to be that snapshot of what the community is likely going to see first, you know, and what they see first is what they're likely going to remember most of the time. And so, you know, we want to make sure we get that infographic right, and then we can have, you know, the data and stuff. I don't see this preliminary survey report having all of this, like, you know, background raw data and stuff like that. That's going to come with the final report, and everything like that, you know. And so, you know, maybe what are your guys' thoughts on maybe via email versus now? It's getting a little bit late, and I see our two new people are not conditioned maybe.
Email, email.
I'm just kidding. I just so you guys know, I do try to always get us out of here before 8, but this is obviously a huge topic. And so when we only meet monthly, we could probably have our meetings if we wanted to meet twice a month, but I prefer the 1-day commitment over multi.
I based my schedule off the BOD meeting, so I blocked off to midnight just in case.
No,
You're used to this.
I
He's
think
been
the latest
conditioned.
I've kept is like 8:15, and I felt bad about that. And that was, I think, the last meeting with the getting the survey out, just because we had so much to do.
I know my answer. I can say it now or email. It doesn't bother me.
It's good to build up the stamina before you start volunteering, Richard.
Mhm.
But yeah, I think for me, it'd be easier to compile kind of everything if everyone would just take the time to write a quick email on their, you know, the biggest. You don't necessarily have to put together 12, but, you know, maybe everyone does like 6 or so. And if everyone puts the same 6, then maybe we discuss further which more need to be included. But I think, you know, in that regard, we could get a good list going if everyone could kind of put 6 together here. And then, you know, Scott, go ahead.
3? Are you saying 3?
Okay.
He's
You're
saying
muted,
3.
Scott. Still muted.
Mute. Yeah.
There you go.
You know, I had this down before I went to the bathroom, and now it's a wreck. All right.
I didn't know about you going to the bathroom, Scott.
Well, it's going to be kidney infections among us all. So there's 3 areas of emphases that I think are really important. And I offer these only because I've had the privilege of digging through this stuff for a couple weeks. The first is unity. We agree on so much more than we differ. And that message needs to be reinforced over and over. The second is that this is a process. We're going to ask you some more questions, people, but bear with us. We're starting on this road, and we're going to perfect it as we go. The third, and this is strategic, is I think whatever this initial report, whatever Josh's graphic sequence looks like, we've got to put to rest the golf course closure issue. That will take away so much negativity and so much skepticism and so much everything from this process. And so however we agree as a group that is best presented to the public, I think that's a very important data point to show people is just don't freak out. This is not the work of extremists. This is, anyway.
I agree.
that's
So
definitely,
if somehow those three are interwoven into, the graphic depiction, the spoon feeding that we're doing to our community, if we can cover at least those three, I think we'll be well on the road.
I
all
agree
right,
too,
Scott.
Yeah.
Scott, you just volunteered to start the email chain by regurgitating what you just said in that, okay?
I'll do that.
Because I'm facilitating these meetings. I'm not a very good note taker in that regard. So
No, I'll be glad to regurgitate again.
okay, thank you. I appreciate that because I do agree. Those are good. I think so a few overarching themes that can kind of create some categories in our infographic or something along those lines would be good. Brian, you got your hand raised?
No, I mean, I was just going to say, yeah, it is heartening that we are more homogeneous than we maybe anticipated, which is fabulous. Those points of connection are a good place to start and to forge a long range plan for sure.
And I would also like to point out too, Scott mentioned this earlier, the breadth of open-ended responses that we got was huge. And we've given you some statistics on some of those, what we called capital questions in the survey regarding the dance barn, the golf course, and the maintenance building. Now, all of those questions had an open-ended element to them at the end, and lots of people selected through that numerous answers. For instance, with the golf course, many people selected, make it self-supporting, including capital, but then wrote down another that they would support leasing it or, that type of thing. Or many people selected they wanted it to be a park, but then they wrote down below that's only because they just want it to be self-supporting. Like they'd be fine if it's just self-supporting. And so we have to code some of that data here so we can dive into that a little bit deeper as well. There's some nuance with how much, opinion we allowed people to present in their own words on the survey. And there's lots of stuff in that to go in that. What did you like best and what do you like least about Sudden Valley? There was almost everybody wrote in those ones. It was a huge number. A lot less people wrote in the other open-ended portions, but still a large amount still did. But there was a difference. Most of it was on the board's open-ended question, and those first two, like what you like best and what you like least. But all of them had a good chunk of information in them, and so we do have to try to compile that information in. None of it is likely shifting any of the results or anything significantly, but it creates more nuance for our future discussions and stuff like that.
So AJ, in final, are we going to have reports that are going to be available on the website for people to access? And so maybe we'll have a summary report, kind of like this draft here, and then perhaps have a larger report that will have more detailed information in it. Does that make sense? And then the raw data.
Yeah, let's talk about that quick here before we wrap up, because that's kind of the last. Like, if everyone can email their kind of top 6 things, that they take away, Scott's going to start that discussion for us here. And then that's going to help us put together this preliminary report. And and my thought process is an infographic that Josh creates is like a 1-page snapshot of that, that captures our most key points we feel are relevant out of this preliminary summary. I think there's probably some charts and stuff that we'll include in this preliminary summary. Like I said before, some people are visual learners, some people read, some people are audio. Everyone learns a little bit differently. So, those charts, while aren't always good for everyone, are good for other people. I'm a chart person, being a numbers guy, not a words guy. Kim,
are we
you got a
sending this
question on
email
that?
right now, AJ? Or is this something that are we
No,
sending
you
this
don't need
email?
to send it right now.
Oh, okay,
But
I wasn't sure.
If you could do it in the next couple days or so, that would be good. I'm sure a lot of you already have your thoughts on it. You just kind of got to put it into words, at this point.
I had
Brian,
a
I think,
tip.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I had a tip for folks when you're selecting your top 6 with critical theory. Critical theory, I took a class and it talked about the 80-20 rule with selection. And so with respect to the what we select versus the outcome of how people will be happy or not, try to think in terms, there's 20% of things that we can do that will make 80% of the people happy. And then there's 80% of things that we can choose that will only make 20% of the people happy. So be thinking when you're selecting your 6 about that action, that 20% of the action that will have the greatest impact on community satisfaction. So just wanted to toss that out there if no one's ever heard of the 80-20 rule.
I have
Brian,
not.
I was
That
going
is
to say that I think that your approach is correct in terms of the final report being the first part being an executive summary that includes that infographic that AJ talked about, and then the full report, and then the appendices that have everything in it.
Yeah, and that's kind of the plan. We'll get you some of these charts. We can start to dissect some of those here and figure out which ones we think are most relevant to be included in this preliminary summary. I know Sonia put together a really cool graphic that breaks down the responses by gate and stuff. That's using like a map and whatnot. And so like that could be a good, things like that help people visualize the data. But then, yeah, I don't envision like exactly what Michael just said. This preliminary report is essentially kind of an executive summary, for the final report is essentially, not entirely, because some of the charts and stuff in the final report we may pull out and whatnot, and put in the main body of the report. But then, yeah, with the main report, in the final report, I envision it taking us a little while to get to there. I said it in my email last night. I think we should present the final survey report via a town hall event, sometime in the January-ish timeframe. The bylaws do tell us that we're supposed to present our 3, 5, and 10-year plan to the board within the first so many meetings. Basically, it's in January, I think. Now, we don't have a 3, 5, and 10-year plan here to present, but what we do have is a planning process that we've put together to get to that point, and we have a survey result, which is the first step in implementing our planning process that we're putting together. And so I think presenting that data at a town hall event along with, presenting it, and maybe I could just not waste board meeting time, and the town hall event would suffice for presenting that to the board, and we present it to the community. We get further input on the results of the survey from the community at that point. I think it'd be a great time to also start to get input from the community on our mission and vision statements, because we've been, before the survey took hold of all of our brains, that was a topic we were, discussing that we need to involve in our planning process and maybe revisiting what those say. And so, yeah, basically, I think the plan would be to shoot for a town hall event in January to present the survey results, get some additional input, and help set that stage for how we're going to continue to connect with the community and engage them, we've promised further input. That there was some confusion with the survey and stuff like that. It's to be expected. It's a long survey. It's an online platform, which is still somewhat new for a survey of this magnitude for a whole community. It's not something we've done regularly as a community, and so I did expect a little bit of confusion, but I think we can move past that pretty easily, and we promise that there's, numerous people that this is not the only input that we intend to get from you, and we need to follow through on that promise. I think it's very important, because of the fact that 2/3 of people don't feel like their input is valued to the association. That needs to change. And so, yeah, I mean, that's, I think, kind of where we're at this point. It's almost 8 o'clock. I don't know if anyone else has any questions kind of on that, or any other statements we want to go over.
AJ, I have something on an unrelated topic, but when I was dropping off my vote at the office the other day, I saw a map outside the office. It's a land use map of Sudden Valley, and they were able to give me a very large copy of that map, and it's really been fascinating to look at. So I would encourage you, if you get an opportunity, to stop by the office and ask for a copy of that map. I think it might be helpful.
Okay. All right. Well, I think, so just to kind of recap real quick here, if everyone can send in an email on kind of your 6 major topics so we can start to put this infographic together. I'm going to work with Kim, Brian, and Steffi on the coding effort with the open-ended questions. And then over the next couple weeks, as we compile that list, we will work with Josh on putting that infographic together and getting that summary out. I'd like to try to get something out to the community here in the next couple weeks or so. You know, maybe we could discuss in November having our meeting the first Tuesday in November instead of the third Tuesday in November, so we could reconvene a little bit sooner here, and then we can maybe take, you know, and then we'll have a nice long break over Thanksgiving and whatnot, and we'll discuss December and the holidays and all that stuff on, you know, whether we want to go that route. You know, I will say, I am going to ask, you know, depending upon, we all know Kim and Brian are running for the board. Steffi is our other board member. You know, if they both do get on the board, you know, we're not going to keep 3 board members on the committee. That's not fair to community member participation. And so, you know, if that happens, we'll have to, you know, we'll be looking at getting, well, we are going to have to get some new community members. You know, I'm anticipating Ty and Richard are, you know, willing to stay on for a 3-year term here starting in November, basically. You know, there's, you know, it's not a commitment that's hard and fast. We've been adamant about that from the beginning. So just, you know,
There's no
we
signature
understand
required.
everyone has families.
Hey, AJ, the first Tuesday in November is election night, so you may want to stay away from that night for
Thank you,
a
Kim.
meeting.
Yeah, we don't have to do Tuesday. We can discuss that via email. We could set a date. We just got to do 48-hour notice, you know, or whatever, and then confirm with John that we're not intruding on other Zoom meetings that are standing or whatever. I think we have so many accounts or whatever, you know, but we will figure that out here over the next couple days and stuff. But I think those are kind of our near-term actions. Let's get going on the coding, and let's start to put together the thoughts on getting this infographic together. And then I'm going to get you guys here over the next couple days, you know, the data and stuff that you guys can start to look at and digest and things like that. Okay. And then, yeah, just to touch on the next year, I think I'm probably going to ask staff to start recruiting members for our committee. We're going to need some people, I think, regardless. And so I'll dive into that, but I may start and open that at like November 1st or something like that. Leave it open for the whole month of November, you know, and then we can have December to look at the pool of applicants. And then at that point, we'll know how many spots we have to fill and things like that. And then we'll deal with that either at a December meeting, or if we just skip a December meeting, you know, we can do January.
AJ, it strikes me that if we keep the momentum in this survey thing, which I'm certain that we will, that's going to really assist recruitment efforts, right? So
Hope so.
So that, I think that's the message, is we're not only listening to you, but if you want to get, more involved in this, there are, many opportunities. So.
All right.
It seems to me we're at a juncture where we have a really positive message to give the community, give the membership, and whatever keeps that rolling is good. And, if we do that right, it'll add to our ranks.
Yeah. All right. Let's do some property owner comments if we have any of that, and then we can all go home. Or we're all home, I guess. Well, maybe not.
How about you, AJ? But I'm in my castle, okay?
We do have a few people with us tonight. I'm going to go ahead and bring Leslie on over. And I suppose go ahead and give your name and address.
Okay, Leslie McRoberts from Caddy Lane. Just a couple of questions, actually. AJ, when you started, you mentioned invalid and incomplete replies, and I understand invalid. I mean, that's, the duplicate IP addresses, the non-residents, and so forth. That's clear. What did you mean by incomplete?
So, hold on, let me find that in the thing again real quick. So by incomplete, a majority of them are associated with duplicate IP addresses. It seemed to be a large case of them where respondents had to restart the survey because they lost connections. So they would have had not a complete response to the survey, and then their next one would have been a complete one. And so we used their complete one. And then, if the IP address only had partially completed surveys, or it was just one IP address with a partially completed survey, we did count that
As much as was filled in, yeah.
As much as what was filled in, yes, exactly. So those were counted. And that'll all be in that preliminary summary report that we put out.
Yeah, okay, no, that makes sense. Okay, and it was very interesting to me, the fact that the respondents were broken down into thirds, really, of 0 to 5 years, 6 to 14, and plus 15 plus. And I'm just curious, on the Long Range Planning Committee itself, how many people have been here 5 years or less? Okay, and then 6 to 15? Okay, yeah, it's I'm looking at just kind of a demographic layout of the committee itself. It looks like that there is some support out there for some different amenities for taking care of things, for the dance barn and so forth. And people seem to be willing to spend money for some of these things. And these things need to be taken, one at a time, because I'm sure that people don't plan on supporting a special assessment for everything all at once. There's things that need to be done, and I just want to make sure that people understand that we need to, carefully examine what those things are and sell it. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Leslie.
Just to elaborate on that real quick and respond, one thing is, like, people are supportive of a lot of this stuff, but there is a notion, in kind of underlying response in the survey that people are not super inclined to, pay a bunch more to do this stuff, and so, there will be a need to really gather more input and make sure that we have backing before we even propose this stuff to the community.
Okay.
All right, have a good night, Leslie.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Just use the raise hand feature if you want to chime in. Doesn't look like it, AJ.
All right. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Let's go
Seconded.
home, or have a good night, everybody. I appreciate all your help, and I appreciate all your continued help on everything.
Good night,